Hi, this is Rachel and Recover. We've got a special guest with us, Bex Cronshaw. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself, and then she's going to answer some questions for us.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, so my name's Bex Cronshaw, and I've been a coach for a really long time now. I actually started out working in the fitness industry, and this was long before I started my own healing journey. And I'm a self-confessed compulsive exerciser. I had problems with food when I was younger, and it was really through this journey of hating myself and hating my own body, if I'm honest, that I found my way into therapy, into going on my own internal journey. And then from that, my own profession transformed into helping other women who have been through this same process of dealing with sexual abuse, sexual assault, and really helping them rediscover themselves, their body, and the love for themselves. And yeah, I wish someone had taught me a long time ago that it's all about love, really. And that's my message now, is that when we can come back to ourselves and come back to love, life is a very different place.
Okay, let's get to the questions. What is it that you do now?
What I do now is I help women reclaim their body, reclaim their sexuality, and also reclaim their no. And that's just this process of healing trauma, right? Healing ourselves. I call it from the inside out. It's that process of learning to love and accept and cherish ourselves, that when we take care of that, the outside world takes care of itself.
Okay, how did you get into this?
Well, I think I already touched on this a little bit already, but yeah, my own journey started when I was a teenager. I had problems with food back then. And my issue, and I know that this is different for everyone, but my issue was, I didn't eat, right? And that was because I was going through an extremely traumatic time, and I didn't have control over anything else that was happening in my life. And so food was one of the few things that I could control. And so I went through my own journey of struggling with not eating. And although on the outside, I think I started to look healthier, I never really dealt with any of those underlying issues myself. So then that sort of transformed into a career in the fitness industry where I was helping people, sort of, but I'm sure you know that when you haven't done your own stuff, right? You haven't done your own work, the scope for which you can help people is limited. And again, through that process, I really became aware of just how many of us struggle with our relationship with food, and just how ingrained that is with our childhoods, with the trauma that we've been through. And that if we're not working on healing that underlying trauma, then any solution that I'm offering, that the whole fitness, the diet industry is offering, is only really surface level stuff, right? You've got to dig a little bit deeper to truly be able to help. So that's my journey of coaching in one area to coaching in something else. And although I enjoyed all of it, what I do now feels more rewarding, I think, because I know that it's touching on the stuff that really changes people's lives now.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a huge, I don't know if you've read The Body Keeps the Score, but if you haven't, I recommend it.
It's amazing, yes.
Yes, no, it talks about how the body keeps track of all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And, I have clients now who for example, they've kept this stuff suppressed for 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years. And then all of a sudden, another book, actually, The Body Says No, right? In Gabor Mate's words, at some point, their body just says no. And there's autoimmune disease or fibromyalgia or all these ways of the body starting to express, like, I'm not okay. but sometimes it's just in a language that we're perhaps not used to hearing or used to tuning into. And then that can be challenging, right? Because then the body doesn't respond in the way that we're used to or the way that we know. And so it's then, okay, well, how do we start to learn the language of the body, and how do we actually start to hear ourselves speak? Yeah.
No. What things have you done to recover from being sexually abused?
It's funny. I think I heard one of your other guests talk about this, and she kind of said, "What haven't I tried?" And I don't know, maybe you have a perspective on your journey too, but I would put myself in the same camp there, and I would say, my healing journey started even at the point where I didn't know anything about my past, right? I just knew that I had this 10-year relationship. We were running a business together, and that relationship was breaking down, and it was complicated. And so I was 30 years old. I was like, I am not where I thought I would be in my life right now. I need some help. And that was where it started. And it was only ongoing on that path that all of the old memories and stuff started to resurface. And it was like, wow, okay, there's a lot more to unpack here than I thought. And so I started with talk therapy. I did about 4 or 5 years of that, got virtually nowhere. Like little changes here and there, but nothing significant in the way that I was moving forward with my life. So talk therapy was for me, unfortunately. And then I was fortunate. I ended up on a path of somatic work, right? So somatic therapy, and a few other things along the way. So certainly breath work has been an enormous component for me. In more recent times, there's a specific type of breath work that I work with called biodynamic breath work, which is specifically for trauma release, which has been unbelievable. And so what else have I tried? Yeah, that's kind of the good and the bad, right? The talk therapy that didn't really work, and the somatic work and the breath work that have just been incredible.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think talk therapy in general needs to be paired with something when you're dealing with trauma, whether it's art therapy or EMDR or neurofeedback or, something else that's going on as well. I think it's kind of like a general practitioner, but just for mental health. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As a tool on its own, maybe when it's paired with something else, it can be helpful, but there are certainly more effective approaches out there now, I think.
Yes. So I don't know. It definitely has its usefulness, and in just finding the right therapist. I mean, you can go see a therapist, but if they're not trained in trauma or in your type of trauma, most of the time you're wasting your time.
Yeah. And I learned that the hard way.
So, I mean, I understand. I mean, I've had therapists, I'm like, this person's too green and they're not going to be able to help me and this is a waste of time. Or they're just not, I'm talking to them and they're looking at me like I have 3 heads. That's not going to work for me either.
Yeah.
So, no, I completely understand that. What was the catalyst that started you on your path to healing in your recovery?
Yeah, it was this breakup of this relationship. We were together for nearly 10 years. And to be honest, again, when I started the healing process, I realized this was an abusive relationship. And I think this happens so often with those of us who have been through abuse or trauma. I hear this a lot from clients. It's that we don't even know what normal is, right? What a healthy relationship is, because that pattern of abuse was ingrained so early on that just becomes normal. So for me, I was just in this bubble of living in, it wasn't a physically abusive relationship, but it was emotionally abusive. And for nearly 10 years, I had no idea.
Yeah, no, that's really, really common.
Yeah. So I sought help because this relationship was breaking down. But that in itself was a really eye-opening experience to see what I'd been allowing myself to go through for so long.
And for other listeners out there, and for Bex, one book I recommend is Why Does He Do That? And it's, the effects are both the same on, it's got a lot of useful tools for both genders. So, but I found that really helpful for those that are in domestic abusive relationships. Mm-hmm. Just to look for the signs.
Yeah, so. And this isn't me by any stretch saying that anyone is okay. It's okay to abuse another person, but having been on my own journey now, I can understand that they are also just other traumatized people, playing out their own trauma in the only way they know how, and I just find that really sad. And so my goal now is to get the message out there to as many people as I can, right? So that more people can not go through what I went through and sit in that situation for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it might be, thinking that either they don't know any different or they don't deserve any different, because that's absolutely not true.
No, I can completely relate to that. What has been the most helpful?
I think different things at different places along the way have been really helpful. And it's funny because all my years in fitness, nobody ever asked me, what qualifications do you have? What pieces of paper do you have? But as soon as you enter the trauma space, it seems that the modality becomes really important. And what I try to say to people is that different modalities and different things have a place at different times. For example, for me, I've done quite a lot of EMDR therapy, and it's been amazing. But EMDR is really effective, I think, when you have this toolkit of emotional regulation to build from. Like if you take someone into a series of EMDR sessions without this ability to regulate their emotions, then that can put them in a very challenging space, in a space potentially of re-traumatizing, of not being able to cope with the amount of, the sensations, the emotions that are coming up from that. So I think a big part of it is, like you said before, it's being in with a person where you feel safe. And it's that relationship with that person, that connection that you have with them, that forms the foundation to healing. And that's the platform on which all the other stuff works. Because without that safe connection, without that kind of root and that anchor, it doesn't matter if you're doing talk therapy, CBT, EMDR, like blah, 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 whatever the letters are. Like you need that root and that safe connection. So that would be my probably most important thing. EMDR is great. The breath work that I do is a very embodied practice, and that's what I really think the essence of healing is. It's coming back into your body and feeling safe in your body. And so for me, it would be that. But again, I feel like that's one of those practices that you need a base level of other stuff before you can step into that. Yeah.
No, I completely understand. I mean, there's stuff that definitely comes with time and at different stages in your healing process that, like, I did EMDR and I've done neurofeedback, but honestly, until, like, started that process, I don't think I would have been as good, Well, I mean, I think the EMDR maybe prepared me for the neurofeedback, which was a lot more intense because, well, yeah, I don't know if anybody else has been through neurofeedback, but it's one of the most emotionally exhausting things I've ever done. I think the only thing else that's about that equivalent is when they start doing electric shock therapy, which is a whole different ballgame entirely. Which has gotten a lot better, but it still has a lot of side effects, which I only recommend in the extreme cases, and most therapists would agree on that. So
I don't know much about that. I don't have anything to contribute on that one, I'm afraid.
that's okay. It's it's I've heard good things, but it's very it's more intense than neurofeedback, and neurofeedback is intense enough for me. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
What do you wish you would have known at starting your healing journey?
Um, that it's about coming home. That really, I'm probably going to get quite emotional now because I feel really strongly about this. For so long I thought that I was broken and that there was something wrong with me. And for a good few years, as I started to heal, it was really about fixing myself. Okay, I need to fix myself because I'm not okay as I am. And the further along the journey I've gone, the more I've realized that that's never what it was about. It was about me accepting myself as I am, not because of what happened, not in spite of what happened, just being okay with who I am right now and loving myself and accepting myself. And there are times where other people have been able to do that for me when I wasn't able to do that myself. And so now it really is about sharing that message of love, that you are lovable, that all of us are lovable human beings as we are in this moment, right? There's nothing that we have to do to gain love, right? We are lovable, we are valuable in our innate being. And that's what it's all about for me. And it's about holding that space now for others to say, like, you know what, like you're totally okay. And maybe all of these things that happened to you made you believe that you're not, but I see something in you that maybe you don't see in yourself right now. And that's my goal with anyone that I connect with on whatever level it might be.
No, I mean, and I feel like that's an important thing, especially those who are struggling, either with their relationships or especially to avoid being in an abusive relationship. So knowing that you deserve to be loved and in a healthy relationship. So
yeah, and I can understand, that was one of the hardest things for me to unwind because it can be so deep rooted. I think we absorb so much in those, especially in those first 7 years of our existence. But the speed at which our brain is developing and absorbing information when we're young is just so incredible that when other people's behavior towards us can send a really clear message that we're not lovable or that we're not acceptable for who we are. And it can be really, really hard to let go of some of those beliefs.
Oh, most definitely.
But I also think that that's the most powerful thing of all. Okay, when we're able to see ourselves for who we truly are and not for what someone else made us believe we were, that's where the power lies.
There's a really powerful book. It's called Get Out of Your Head. I think it's by Janine. I can't remember her last name. But I recommend her book, especially if, for those who are struggling with negative thinking in their head about themselves. It's a really powerful book. I really enjoyed reading it. How did your family respond when you came out?
Wow. Not very well would be the short answer to that. I think it's difficult. And I would say that my abuser had already passed away when this came out for me. So that relationship itself was not something that was ever able or needed to be addressed. My immediate family were just denial. Like they just could not fundamentally get their head around the fact that this could have happened, which I understand because I spent most of my adult life in denial about it as well. So I understand that again, that defense mechanism that was going on for them that put them into that same space of denial. It was almost a year where I didn't speak to my mom because she just wasn't prepared to acknowledge it. But then I think that was a really important learning for me as well, in terms of being able to set those boundaries and say, you know, if you can't accept my truth, then I can't be a part of this relationship. And so that was a really hard period of time, but actually an important learning for me in setting boundaries in place. And now, I mean, we still have to work at it, but our relationship has made huge amounts of progress, right? She realized that that approach wasn't going to work. And it was okay, change or lose my daughter. And she chose change, which is amazing. And I'm incredibly appreciative of that right now. Now, I know some people aren't that fortunate and their families never get there. And that's also possible. I don't know if what your experience was there, but you know, I think where I've got to on it now is that as long as I hold my truth and I'm true to myself, then that's enough.
No, I can relate. No, I was trauma bonded with my father for up until about 14 months ago because he was my abuser. And so, but my mother was a borderline, so he was also my protector when she would go into her rages. And so it's kind of like pick your poison, unfortunately. But, you know, that's a whole other story. So, how did your community respond?
Well, so that's been interesting. So my community, I suppose, I have my friendship group, I have my family, and then I have my work environment. Um, my family, I've communicated with the essentials, right? They will never fully understand why I'm or how I'm working in the space that I do now, and that's something that I just accept. The community I'm in have been incredible and so supportive. But that's ultimately because I'm working in a space now that is all about people who are in the same place as me, right? Who want to support others on their healing journey. So most of my friends, most of my contacts are breath workers, energy workers, even a few therapists, you know, people who are really committed to this personal growth and this personal development themselves. And that's really important to me, you know, because I think like you said earlier, that's how we have healthy relationships. We're forming connections with other people who are not necessarily never triggered, right? Or not to say that we all get it right all of the time, but that we have the awareness to and the courage to have those difficult conversations. And that's a really big part of it, I think, to be able to, like I said before, to have the courage to speak up, to be vulnerable, and to speak our truth, no matter what the consequence. Because it's easy to stay in our comfort zone and to play it safe, but it's not a true, authentic connection unless we're actually speaking from our heart. And I'm really grateful for that. I have some really great people in my life, and it hasn't always been like that.
Yeah, no, that can be a very much a turning point for a lot of people. And I think even for myself, I've been doing all these, you know, therapies and stuff to work through it, but until I broke my trauma bond, I didn't see a lot of fruit. So I think that really slowed down my progression. And if I had already broken that trauma bond, a lot of the work would have been a lot more fruitful, I think, at the time. So, I think that's it. Bex, thanks for coming on our show. Hope to have you again on here sometime again at some point. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out?
No, just thank you for having me. And if anyone would like to find me, I have a support group on Facebook. I would love for you to come and say hello. So you can find me just at Bex Cronshaw on Facebook. And yeah, it's been beautiful sharing these things with you. So thank you so much.
All right, guys, this is Rachel in Recovery. You can follow us on social media, find us on your favorite podcast platform, or always find us on RachelOnRecovery.com. Thanks for listening. See you next Thursday.